Hello you beautiful people. Today we're going to be talking about the basics of bull skating, transition skating. We're going to go to some of the fundamentals like carving, dropping in, keeping your weight distributed, carve grinds, some of the basics of transition. On this channel I go into some of the technical how to skate transition tips, so this is going to be for the beginner, and if you're already an expert at transition, maybe there will be a couple tips and hits in here that you can apply to your already mastered skill. So let's jump into it. Alright, so when it comes to pumping, it's much like a swing. When you're on the swing, you're kind of pumping at the bottom to get up and back, up and back. It's kind of the similar thing. Essentially, you want to bend your knees at the bottom of the transition and then keep them compressed while you're going through the transition. And then at the end, you kind of extend the knees at the bottom of the transition. So the whole time you're on the transition, you're essentially sucking it up and then pushing out of it. So you're sort of pushing up and pushing out. But in the beginning stages, you don't need to worry so much about the pushing up. You kind of just suck it up and then push out of the transition. That's really gonna help you. Essentially just keep your knees bent when you're on the transition and bend them as you're going out of the transition to get speed. You're kind of like a pendulum. Think of it as you're being a human pendulum, swinging in between and using gravity to kind of pull you around the transition. A common mistake when people are trying to learn how to pump is their foot placement. They tend to lean super far back, kind of like a similar thing when people are learning how to drop in. They're sort of leaning back as a safety net, safety precaution, but actually that's a lot more dangerous. I'm going to show you a good foot placement for pumping. I think you want to have your back foot essentially right into the pocket and your front foot over your bolts. That is going to be the best position because you're going to have a nice center of gravity, and essentially that's what you want to make sure you have is a nice center of gravity, because again, you're kind of like a pendulum and your center of gravity or where you're standing is essentially going to hold you in. So when you're going around the bull, you can kind of use your head and tuck it in as well. So using the top part of your body, your shoulders and everything, and using those with the transition, whichever way you are going, is definitely going to help you stay with the momentum and keep a sense of center of gravity. Otherwise you're going to fall over and it's very easy to kind of lose your balance and sort of zing out. If you want to slow down, you feel like you're going too fast, you can stiffen up, and that will essentially slow you down really quick. As soon as you stop pumping, you can slow down. That's definitely a technique when you're in transition. If you feel like you have too much speed, just don't pump as much. Eventually, as you get better at pumping transition, you can kind of use corners to your advantage and decompress at the top and get a lot more speed, but that comes with time. If you're just learning, keep your knees bent and hold your position when you're going through corners, and it'll help you kind of make your way around it. Another way to sort of envision carving or the corner or something like I'm doing here is to just send your board in that direction without you, and you'll see that a lot of the times your board will go exactly where you'll end up going, or you can use a ball or something of that nature. Basically, you're just using gravity and physics to show you and give you an example of how it will work if you just commit to that direction. So sometimes you can just draw out your line when you're carving before you start, and that'll really help. You don't need to start on something super small. I actually suggest learning how to carve on something bigger because there's a lot more transition. You have more room for air, more room to play with. You don't have to go all the way to the top. You can stay at the bottom. They call it the scum line, where you basically stay at the very bottom of the entire bull and ride the radius in the transition. That'll really get you used to skating bulls. Having looser trucks will definitely help you carve the bull too, because it'll base off your weight. So don't go too loose to where you're falling over, but essentially having looser trucks is gonna allow you to not have to tic-tac and kick turn so much, but allow you to actually use those curves and use those corners to your advantage. So definitely loosen up your trucks if you're feeling like you can't really carve and there's too much tension. Sometimes that can be a super helpful tip for beginners. When it comes to dropping in, that is definitely one of the scariest tricks to learn when it comes to transition skating, but it is like learning the ollie. It will definitely improve your skills and allow you to skate so many different things. Learning how to drop in on a bank like behind me is going to be a lot more functional, a lot more easy to start with if you're just learning how to skateboard. So starting just putting your tail on the very edge of that bank, putting your feet, your front foot right on your bolts and leaning forward. Again, kind of like that pendulum. So if you start with carving, I think dropping in is going to be a lot easier because you're going to understand the transition radius and how it works with just gravity and your equilibrium and everything else. So with that said, dropping in is definitely a fundamental step in skating transition, but Just get that tail, make sure you hit it back. Sometimes you can scoot your tail, making sure the wheels are right on the edge of that transition, and basically stomping your front foot on your bolts and leaning your whole body forward and getting compressed. A lot of times people like to kind of stand up because they're half wanting to go. They want to do it, but they don't mentally want to do it. So you definitely have to be committed to the drop in. You're probably going to take a few slams to figure it out, but I will say the lower you get, the more you compress your body in the drop in, the less likely it is that you're gonna slam, less likely you're gonna fall over, because essentially you're just being one with the board. You're getting lower, you're getting compact, and you're just dropping and you're letting the gravity pull you down. So that's definitely gonna help you. When it comes to rolling in, I think you can also learn on a basic bank like this. This is a good starting point. As you get comfortable dropping in on smaller banks like that example, you eventually start going into the transition and figuring out that little bit of a zing factor, and you're kind of put into the middle of the pendulum and going straight into it versus working your way up. And that is the big difference when it comes to dropping in. When it comes to pull coping, it definitely has a lot more lock-in, so it's actually more secure. You get your back wheels in there, your tail really locked on. And sometimes it can be intimidating dropping in on pull coping because it feels like it's a little bit more of a ledge. But in all reality, it actually sets you right into the transition a lot better, a lot smoother. The only difference is you just have to be more compressed. It's less of a bank, so you kind of have to have more of that transition, more of that pumping motion going when you're dropping into more of a steeper transition versus a bank. Wheel size obviously plays a big factor in transition skating too. I like 54 millimeter wheels because I also like skating street, like a lot of different stuff. It's a good in between. I actually did a whole video on board setups for transition. I'll leave a little link up here to check that out if you're interested in the right board setup for learning how to skate transition. But I think that definitely is going to help you. Wider trucks, a bigger board, kind of general rule of thumb is going to be a lot easier when you're skating transition. All right, so we started with carving, then we got dropping in, then we did roll-ins, a little bit of rolling in, and I think that comes with time too. One thing that I did a little bit different than most people is I actually learned how to roll in on transition before I started dropping in. So I'm actually more comfortable with rolling in on certain things more than I am dropping in. And that's pretty odd. Most skaters are more comfortable with dropping in. But I will say the thing with dropping in, the difference is it is more of an abrupt and you have to come down onto it. And this is just kind of my mental mentality behind it, is that when you're rolling in, you're kind of already in motion. You're not having to do this abrupt stop and go motion, and you're starting and you're kind of just carving into the transition. The big technique with rolling in is going at enough angle to where your wheels almost like go into it as if you were carving the transition. So instead of acid dropping, which is like going straight into the transition, which is like a Dwayne Peters way of rolling in, you don't have to go so straight in. You could go at a much more deep angle, and then it could be like you're already carving. You kind of make your way into the bowl, similar to like how surfers drop into on waves. I feel like that's a pretty good comparison. The next thing I wanted to talk about was slash grind and carve grinds. Those are two more fundamentals that are fun with bull skating. Common theme that I see a lot when people are trying to learn how to skate transition or bowls is they go and get some knee pads right away. Well, I think knee pads are super helpful if you're skating vert or something above 10 feet or 9 feet or even like 6 feet. Really, they're gonna help you a lot. But when you're first learning how to skate transition, you're learning how to drop in and carve and some of the fundamentals that we're going over today, I honestly think butt slides might be a better trick to learn than knee slides, because when you're on something super small like 3 feet, going to your knee can actually be really dangerous because you're having to step on your foot and then knee slide. So it can be really detrimental to your knee. It can really just mess up your knee. So I highly suggest actually learning how to butt slide and run out of tricks. It sounds kind of crazy, and maybe it's because I'm young still, but I do think that is a better way to learn the fundamentals. And then as you're getting, into the bigger transition, like this transition behind me, if you're starting to learn how to do tricks or grinds and stuff like that, that's when you can use knee pads, because you can go straight to your knees and it's a great safety net. But I just want to say, I highly recommend learning how to butt slide. It is a trick of its own, and it's something that I never really see people talking about, is learning how to butt slide. So when you're going backside, literally just kick your board in front of you and try to slide like you're going down a slide, like you're jumping into a slide like you're a little kid again. Or if you're going front side, same thing. Try to shoot your board in front of you and slide, kicking your feet out and going onto your butt. Now this might sound kind of dangerous, but when you're close enough to the transition, you're really only getting a few feet of a gap, and then you're kind of sliding into it. And it's not straight down. Typically you're sliding down a little bit of the transition. If you're on something that's like 2 or 3 feet, running out is going to be your best bet, and then trying to slide. So my point being is, if you're gonna get some knee pads, learn how to knee slide, that's fine, but also understand that that can be detrimental to your success, because you might go straight to your knees and use it too much of a blanket, and you can also hurt yourself knee sliding. So learning how to butt slide and learning how to run out of tricks can be a very good technique if you want to learn that in the very early stages of transition skating. It's gonna help you in the long run. You know, when I was younger, I used to thought that was like the cool thing to do. That's what the core skaters did, is like no knee pads, and that's not necessarily it. There is a functionality to it. Like this small transition up here, I'm going to show you some clips of me just kind of belling onto my butt. To me, that is much safer than trying to go onto my knees, where I could potentially then hit my elbows and then potentially my face. So it's just more of a safety net. It's a little more thought out. I know some older guys might be like, that is not realistic, but I highly suggest just trying it. Maybe there needs to be a butt pad for skateboarding. That would be amazing. Woo, that's a really cut short frontside grind, just so I can try to get this clip where I grind and then talk to you. So when it comes to frontside grinds or backside grinds, slash grinds and bulls, it's definitely something that you got to work your confidence up into. So it's definitely something you got to get the right mindset, the positivity, the courage to do it, if you will. After you're carving, kick turning, dropping in, you're eventually going to start getting really close to that lip, and you're going to get that confidence. So that's going to come with time. Learning on something about this size is about like a 4-foot transition probably, or maybe like a 7-foot transition, but 4 feet high. It's really mellow transition is my point, and it's not too tall, and that is a good thing to learn slash grinds on. Something that's nice and mellow but tall enough to where you can actually get your whole truck on there. Having wider trucks like 169s are definitely gonna help. Like I said, a good board setup for transition is gonna help you on tricks like this. But my point being is, it's kind of like the kick turn. You're essentially kick turning or carving and then just trying to hit that coping and come to the edge. When it comes to bulls, the really cool part is there's tile, so that's a good way to kind of know where you're at, mark your level. So a lot of times what I see people do is you carve or kick turn and hit that tile, and the more you hear the tile, the longer you hear the tile, you know that you're that close and you're that higher up. So it's definitely something that could work to your advantage. And something else I want to say with kick turns, going back a little bit, is you don't want to push up too much, because the higher your board goes up, the more you just have to control it. You barely need to even lift your board when you're doing kick turns or carves, and when you're carving, you're not really lifting your board at all. You're kind of just going with the motion of the transition. But even when you're kick turning, it's essentially going into the slash grind. That's what you're doing. You're just kick turning into the slash grind and kick turning out. That's really what it is. And you're just hitting the lip, and sometimes that can be really scary, hitting the lip. So learning how to stand up grind can be easier. And I made a whole video about grinds. I'll leave a little link up here above. Me and Albert now, we went through like the fundamentals of stand up frontside grinds and slash grinds. So leave some more tips in that video. But when it comes to grinds, it's really about working your way up to the coping, using that tile to get your confidence, as well as just, it's not a lift, it's really just a kick turn. A lot of times people try to lift onto the coping and lift off. There's not much of a lift. You have wheels that are gonna roll over the coping, your trucks are gonna hit, and they're gonna roll off. Sometimes it helps to even do it with your hands to get used to the motion. Another way to think about like carve grinds or slash grinds is, it's like a car on a track that's hitting its guardrail. Like that's all you're doing, you're hitting the guardrail and you're coming back in. So a lot of times when you hit the coping and the right speed and the right momentum, it's gonna send you right back in if it's well designed. So don't be scared that you're gonna fall off or zing out. It's kind of the guardrail for the bull. Now, the difference between a carve grind and a slash grind is essentially your trucks do not get lifted up on the carve grind. Your front truck starts to grind, your back truck starts to grind, the front truck comes off, and then the back truck comes off. And the opposite with the slash grind is it's just your back truck hitting it, whether you're going front side or back side. So that's the big difference with carve grinds. Carve grinds are definitely a technique that come with time. I think it's more of a skill set thing, where slash grinds you can figure out a lot quicker. Carve grinds, it does come with more confidence, but you're essentially just drawing out. It's again kind of like pumping, but you're drawing out all of the transition, and you kind of just want to pinpoint the place where your trucks are going to hit the coping. So then it allows you to sort of make that pendulum effect to where you're going up and you're hitting that coping, not overshooting it. That does tend to happen sometimes. People overshoot it, but that's normally in an actual pool because the coping is a little more aggressive, where in skate park pools, this coping is made for you to grind. All right, y'all, that is it for this video. I gotta head over to work. It's almost 8:30 now. Gotta get on the grind. Appreciate y'all for watching this video. Make sure you smash that like button if you enjoyed these kind of simple fundamentals of bowl skating. I want to do more trick tips in transition because that is what I've skated pretty much my whole life, is skating transition. So leave a comment down below with what tricks you would like to learn next, and subscribe if you're not already. Please support this channel. We'll see you guys in the next one. Mash.